Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, a 13th century Persian poet, a scholar, a mystic, a man who lost his closest companion, and from that loss poured out some of the most penetrating words ever written. He was born in 1207 in what is now Afghanistan. His family fled the Mongol invasions, eventually settling in Konya in modern-day Turkey. He was raised in a world of Islamic scholarship. His father was a theologian, a preacher, a mystic in his own right, and Rumi followed that path, became a respected scholar, a teacher, a man of religion. But then something happened, something that broke him open. He met Shams-e Tabrizi, a wandering dervish, a wild, untamed mystic who didn't care about convention or reputation. And this meeting, this collision, changed everything. Shams didn't teach Rumi through books or lectures. He taught him through presence, through provocation, through love. And when Shams disappeared, vanished, likely murdered, Rumi didn't collapse into silence. He erupted into poetry, into song, into a grief so vast it became its own kind of worship. What came out of that eruption was the Masnavi, over 25,000 verses, 6 volumes, a work so towering that it's been called the Quran in Persian, not as a replacement, but as a tribute to how deeply it drinks from the same spiritual well. And within the Masnavi, woven through its verses like threads in a vast tapestry, are Rumi's parables. Now, when we say parables, we're not talking about simple children's stories. We're not talking about neat little fables with a tidy moral at the end. Rumi's parables are something else entirely. They're traps, beautiful, elegant traps. He draws you in with a story, a merchant, a bird, a fool, a king, and before you realize what's happening, he's holding a mirror to your face. And what you see in that mirror isn't always comfortable. That's what makes Rumi different from so many other poets and thinkers. He doesn't lecture, he doesn't wag his finger, he tells a story, and the story does the work. A parrot dies in a cage, and suddenly you're thinking about your own captivity. A man searches for fire while sitting on a lit candle, and you feel the sting of recognition. An elephant in a dark room gets mistaken for a wall, a rope, a fan, and you realize how small your understanding has always been. Rumi argues that human beings are asleep, not physically, spiritually. He believes we walk through life mistaking shadows for substance, mistaking the cage for the world, and his parables, every single one of them, are designed to shake you awake. But he does it gently, with beauty, with wit, with a kind of compassion that only someone who has suffered deeply can offer. He doesn't say, "You are blind." He tells you a story about a blind man and lets you arrive at the truth yourself. That's the genius of it. Rumi understood something essential about human nature. We resist being told, but we can't resist a good story. So he wrapped the deepest truths he knew inside stories that are almost impossible to forget. And here's the thing. These parables are over 750 years old, but they don't feel old. They feel like they were written yesterday by someone who's been watching you, watching your fears, your attachments, your self-deceptions. Because the human condition hasn't changed. The costumes are different, the technology is different, but the inner struggles, the greed, the ego, the longing, the blindness, they're exactly the same. So what we're going to do here is walk through some of Rumi's most powerful parables, one by one. Not to analyze them like scholars, but to sit with them, to let them work on us the way Rumi intended. Because these aren't just stories, they're medicine, and the dose is in the listening. Rumi tells a story Simple on the surface, devastating underneath. A group of people are led into a dark room. Inside that room stands an elephant, but no one can see it. The room is pitch black. So they do what anyone would do. They reach out, they touch, they feel. One person grabs the trunk. "This is a water pipe," he declares. Another finds the ear. "No, it's a fan." A third wraps his arms around the leg. "You're both wrong. It's a pillar." And someone else runs a hand along the elephant's back. "It's a throne," he says with certainty. Every single one of them is confident. Every single one of them is wrong. Not because they're stupid, not because they're lying, but because each of them touched only a fragment and mistook that fragment for the whole. And Rumi, he doesn't laugh at them, he weeps for them, because this, he argues, is the human condition. This is what we do every single day. With truth, with God, with each other, we grab hold of one piece of reality, one experience, one perspective, and we build an entire worldview around it. And then we fight anyone who holds a different piece. That's the tragedy Rumi is pointing to. Not ignorance, arrogance, born from partial knowledge. He makes it clear each person in that room was touching something real. The trunk is real, the ear is real, the leg is real. No one was hallucinating, but each of them made the same fatal error. They assumed their experience was the complete experience. And here's where it gets sharp. Rumi says, if each person had held a candle, if there had been even a small light in that room, all disagreements would have vanished instantly. Because in the light, you don't argue about whether it's a pipe or a fan. You see the elephant, whole, complete, undeniable. So the question becomes, what is that candle? Rumi suggests it's awareness, inner sight, the willingness to accept that what you know might only be a part, not the whole, never the whole. And this is where the parable cuts deep into daily life. How many arguments between friends, between lovers, between nations come down to this exact problem? Two people, each holding a real piece of truth, each refusing to believe there's more to the picture than what they've touched. He warns us, certainty without humility is blindness. You can be absolutely sure of what you felt and still be absolutely wrong about what it means. So, what do we take from this? First, partial knowledge is dangerous, not because it's false, but because it feels complete. That's the trap. It feels like you have the answer, and that feeling, that certainty, it shuts the door. It stops you from seeking further. Second, Rumi argues that conflict, at its root, is a problem of perception. People don't fight because they see the same thing and disagree. They fight because they see different things, and each assumes there's nothing else to see. Third, and this might be the most important one, the solution isn't more argument, it's more light. Rumi doesn't suggest the people in the room should debate harder or shout louder. He says they need illumination. They need to step back from their fragment and seek the whole. And that's not easy because our fragment feels like home. It's familiar. It's what we know. Letting go of it, even just loosening our grip, that takes something. It takes humility. It takes courage. It takes a kind of surrender that the ego resists with everything it has. But Rumi is clear. Until you hold that candle up, until you're willing to see beyond your own hand, you'll spend your life arguing about elephants in the dark, and you'll never even know what you're missing. Rumi tells the story of 3 fish living in a pond. Word reaches them, fishermen are coming. And what happens next is everything. Because Rumi isn't really talking about fish. He's talking about you, about how you respond when life sends you a warning. The first fish, Rumi calls it the wisest, doesn't wait, doesn't deliberate, doesn't gather opinions. The moment it hears the fishermen are on their way, it moves. It leaves the pond, finds the open sea. No hesitation, no second guessing, gone. And here's what Rumi wants you to notice. The danger hadn't arrived yet. The nets weren't in the water. The fishermen were still on their way. But this fish understood something most people don't. By the time the threat is visible, it's often too late to act.
So it moved on instinct, on foresight, on a kind of inner knowing that doesn't need proof to act. The second fish, clever, but not wise, it waits, stays in the pond, and when the fishermen arrive and the net closes around it, it plays dead. It goes limp. The fishermen toss it back into the water, thinking it's already gone, and the fish escapes. Rumi acknowledges this. The second fish survived, but barely. It used its wits under pressure. It improvised in the middle of crisis. And yes, it worked. But Rumi makes a sharp distinction here. Cleverness is not the same as wisdom. The second fish put itself in a position where survival depended on luck and quick thinking. It had the same warning the first fish had. The same window, but it didn't move. And so it had to fight its way out of a trap it could have avoided entirely. The third fish, it did nothing. It heard the warning. It saw the first fish leave. It watched the danger approach. And still, it stayed. It trusted fate. It told itself things would work out. Maybe the fishermen wouldn't come. Maybe the net wouldn't reach it. Maybe something would save it at the last moment. Nothing did. The third fish was caught and killed. Rumi doesn't soften this. He lets the weight of it land, because he's making a point that's almost uncomfortable in its clarity. Passivity is not faith. Waiting is not trust. Doing nothing in the face of clear danger and calling it surrender to God, Rumi rejects that completely. He argues that God gave you legs to walk, eyes to see, and a mind to read the signs. To ignore all of that and then blame destiny, that's not devotion, that's negligence. So what does Rumi want you to take from this? The first lesson is about foresight. Rumi urges you to act before the crisis arrives. Don't wait for proof of disaster. If your intuition speaks, listen. Move early, move decisively. The wise don't need the net to close around them before they start swimming. The second lesson, cleverness can save you, but it shouldn't be your strategy. The second fish survived, yes, but Rumi is clear. It suffered unnecessarily. It endured fear, panic, and the jaws of the net, all because it delayed. Intelligence without timing is just damage control. And the third lesson is the hardest one. Rumi warns against spiritual laziness disguised as faith. There's a difference between trusting God and being passive. Real surrender, Rumi argues, comes after effort, not instead of it. You do the work, you take the step, and then you trust, not before. 3 fish, 3 responses. One morning, Rumi holds up this story like a mirror, and the question he's really asking is simple. Which fish are you? And more importantly, which fish will you choose to be the next time life sends you a sign? There's a parable Rumi tells in the Masnavi. A chickpea sits in a pot of boiling water. The heat rises, the water churns, and the chickpea, desperate, panicked, tries to leap out. Again and again it jumps, and again the cook pushes it back down with a ladle. The chickpea cries out, "Why are you doing this to me?
Why this cruelty? I was fine before. I was whole. I was dry and comfortable. Why must I burn? And the cook, calm, unmoved, speaks, not with anger, not with indifference, but with something closer to love. She says, "You think I'm your enemy. I'm not. This fire isn't here to destroy you. It's here to soften you, to change you, to make you into something nourishing, something worthy of the table. You were once a hard, dry thing sitting in a garden, drinking water from the soil. And even that water, even that comfort, was preparing you for this moment, for this fire." That's the parable. And Rumi doesn't leave it as a cute kitchen story. He drives it somewhere deep. The chickpea, Rumi argues, is you. It's me. It's every human soul that finds itself in suffering and immediately wants out. The boiling water is life. Its losses, its heartbreaks, its humiliations, the moments that strip you bare. And the cook? The cook is God, or fate, or whatever force you believe is shaping the larger design. And the ladle that keeps pushing you back down, that's the part most people hate, because it means the suffering isn't accidental, it's intentional. Not cruel, but purposeful. Rumi is saying something uncomfortable here. He's saying that the very thing you're trying to escape is the thing making you whole. See, the chickpea doesn't understand fire. All it knows is pain. All it feels is heat. It doesn't know that on the other side of this boiling is softness, flavor, nourishment. It can't see the table. It can't see the meal. It only sees the pot. And that's what Rumi points out about human beings. We judge our suffering from inside the pot. We never see the full picture. We curse the fire without realizing it's cooking us into who we're meant to become. But here's where Rumi twists the knife, gently. He warns that the chickpea's greatest danger isn't the fire, it's the jumping out. It's the refusal to be cooked. Because a chickpea that escapes the pot, it stays hard, it stays raw, it never becomes what it was meant to be. And that, Rumi suggests, is the real tragedy. Not the suffering, but the wasted suffering, the pain you ran from before it could finish its work. So, what do we take from this? A few things. Hard things. First, resistance to pain doesn't save you, it stalls you. Rumi isn't glorifying suffering for its own sake. He's saying that when life puts you through fire, there's often a process at work that your mind can't grasp yet, and fighting it blindly only delays what's trying to emerge. Second, trust matters more than understanding. The chickpea doesn't need to understand thermodynamics, it needs to trust the cook. Rumi argues that surrender isn't weakness, it's the most radical form of courage, to stay in the heat when every part of you wants to flee. And third, comfort is not the goal. The chickpea was comfortable before the pot, dry, hard, unchanged. Rumi makes it clear, comfort can be a kind of death, a slow, invisible one, where nothing grows, nothing softens, nothing transforms. The fire, he says, is not your enemy. It never was. The real enemy is the version of you that refuses to be cooked. A lion, a wolf, and a fox go hunting together. They bring down 3 animals, a wild ox, a mountain goat, and a hare. A good hunt, a full day. Then comes the moment that matters, not the hunt, the division. The lion turns to the wolf and asks him to divide the prey. And the wolf, feeling bold, feeling equal, speaks up. He says the ox should go to the lion, the goat to himself, and the hare to the fox. Fair, right? Reasonable, logical even. The lion doesn't think so. One strike, the wolf is dead.
Then the lion turns to the fox. Same question. Divide the prey. And the fox, who just watched the wolf die, bows low and says, "The ox is for your majesty's breakfast, the goat for your lunch, and the hare for your evening meal." The lion, pleased, asks the fox where he learned such fine wisdom. The fox replies, "From the wolf lying dead beside you." That's the parable. Simple on the surface. But Rumi doesn't tell simple stories. He buries truth inside them, like seeds inside hard soil. So what is he really saying? He's not praising the fox for being a flatterer. He's not glorifying the lion's tyranny. And he's certainly not mocking the wolf for being fair. Rumi argues that the wolf's mistake wasn't his sense of justice. It was his blindness. He forgot who he was standing in front of. He divided the prey as if all three were equals, but they weren't. The lion is the lion, and the wolf traded the situation as though power didn't exist. That's the first lesson. Know the reality of where you stand. Not where you wish you stood, not where you think you deserve to stand, where you actually stand. The wolf saw the world as he wanted it to be. The fox saw it as it was. And the fox didn't learn wisdom from a book. He learned it from watching someone else's destruction. Rumi points out something brutal here, that some of the deepest lessons come at the cost of another person's ruin. The fox's teacher was a corpse. He didn't need a lecture. He needed a warning. And the wolf's death was that warning. That's the second lesson. Learn from what happens to others before it happens to you. Most people wait for their own disaster. The wise watch and adjust. But there's a deeper layer still. Rumi uses this parable in the Masnavi not just as a lesson about worldly power, but about the ego standing before God. The lion, in Rumi's framework, represents the divine force, the overwhelming, unchallengeable reality. And the wolf? The wolf is the nafs, the ego, that walks into the presence of something infinitely greater and still tries to negotiate its share. He warns that the ego always overestimates its position. It bargains, it divides, it claims portions it was never entitled to. And it does all this while standing in the shadow of something that could annihilate it in a single breath. The fox, on the other hand, represents surrender. Not cowardice, surrender. He gives everything to the lion, not because he's weak, but because he understands. He has no illusions about the nature of the encounter. And that's the third lesson. Surrender isn't the absence of strength. It's the presence of clarity. Rumi doesn't tell this story to make us feel small. He tells it to wake us up, to remind us that life constantly places us in rooms where the power dynamic is not in our favor. And in those rooms, the question isn't whether we're brave enough to speak. The question is whether we're wise enough to see. The wolf was brave. The fox was wise. Only one walked away. A grammarian boards a small boat. A simple boatman rows him across the water. And somewhere between the two shores, the grammarian opens his mouth, not to speak, but to measure. He asks the boatman, "Have you ever studied grammar?" The boatman shakes his head, "No." The grammarian smirks. "Then half your life has been wasted." The boatman says nothing. He just rows. He absorbs the insult the way the river absorbs a stone, quietly, without breaking. But then the weather turns. A storm rolls in. The wind tears at the sail. Water crashes over the sides. The boat begins to sink. And now the boatman turns to the grammarian. Calm, steady. He asks one question. "Do you know how to swim?" The grammarian, pale, trembling, says no. The boatman replies, "Then all your life has been wasted, because this boat is going down."
That's it. That's the whole parable. But Rumi isn't telling a joke. He's delivering a verdict. He's saying, knowledge that cannot save you is decoration. It's furniture in a burning house. It looks impressive. It means nothing when the floor gives way.
The grammarian represents a very specific kind of person, someone who confuses information with wisdom, someone who hoards intellectual credentials like armor, but that armor is made of paper. Rumi points out that this man knew how to arrange words perfectly. He knew syntax, structure, rules, but he didn't know how to survive. He didn't know life.
And the boatman, he had no education, no titles, no sophistication, but he had something the grammarian didn't, a skill that mattered when it mattered. He could navigate the storm. He could stay alive. Rumi argues that real knowledge is not what you can recite. It's what you can use when everything falls apart. It's not about how much you've read. It's about how deep you've lived. And here's where it cuts even deeper.
The grammarian didn't just lack survival skills. He lacked humility. He looked at the boatman and saw someone beneath him, someone incomplete, someone less. He measured the boatman's worth by his own standards and found him wanting. But Rumi flips the mirror. He shows us that the grammarian was the one who was incomplete, the one who was lacking. He had spent his whole life perfecting language, but he never learned the language of humility, never learned the grammar of the soul.
So what do we take from this? First, arrogance built on knowledge is still arrogance. It doesn't matter how many books you've read, how many degrees hang on your wall. If your knowledge makes you look down on others, it hasn't elevated you, it's buried you. Rumi warns that pride dressed in intellect is the most dangerous kind because it believes it's earned the right to judge.
Second, there's a difference between knowing and understanding. The grammarian knew rules. The boatman understood the river. One had theory, the other had truth. And when the storm came, theory drowned. Rumi reminds us that lived experience, practical wisdom, and inner knowing carry a weight that no textbook ever will. Third, every life will face its storm, every single one. And in that moment, the only question that matters is, can you swim? Not can you quote, not can you argue, can you swim? Rumi asks us to examine what we've actually prepared for, not what we've accumulated, what we've prepared for. And the final lesson, maybe the sharpest one, never underestimate the person sitting across from you. The boatman had no grammar, but he had the river. He had the wind. He had the knowledge that kept him breathing. Rumi teaches that wisdom doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it rows a boat. There's a story Rumi tells in the Masnavi. A shepherd is praying, but his prayer, it's not what you'd expect. He's talking to God the way a child talks to someone he loves. "Where are you?" he says, "so I can serve you, so I can comb your hair, wash your robe, bring me milk." He wants to kiss God's hands, rub his feet, sweep his room at night. That's how he prays. And Moses, the prophet Moses, happens to walk by. He hears this, and he's appalled. "What are you saying?" he snaps. "God doesn't have a body. He doesn't need milk. He doesn't need his shoes polished. You're being ignorant. You're being disrespectful." The shepherd doesn't argue. He tears his clothes, he groans, and he walks off into the desert, broken. But then, and this is where Rumi drives the blade in, God speaks to Moses, and he's not pleased. "You just turned away one of my servants," God tells him. "I didn't give people mouths and ears and tongues so they could perform prayer correctly. I gave them a heart, and that shepherd's heart, it was on fire for me." His words were clumsy, yes, but his love was pure. Rumi, through God's voice, delivers one of the most confronting lines in all of mystical literature. I look not at the tongue. I look not at the form. I look at the spirit inside. I look at the humility of the heart. Moses is shattered. He runs after the shepherd. He finds him and tells him, "Pray however you want. Whatever words come, let them come. Your longing is the prayer." But here's the turn most people miss. The shepherd, by that point, has already moved beyond words. He tells Moses, "I've passed even that now. My heart has gone somewhere language can't follow." Rumi argues that this is what real devotion looks like. Not polished, not performed, not wrapped in theological precision. It's raw, it's messy, and it's more real than any ritual done without feeling. And he warns, sharply, about the danger of using knowledge to crush sincerity. Moses wasn't wrong about theology. God doesn't have a body. God doesn't need milk. But Rumi's point isn't about who's theologically correct. It's about who's spiritually alive. And the shepherd, the uneducated, stumbling, love-drunk shepherd, was closer to God than the prophet who corrected him. That should stop you in your tracks. So what do we take from this? First, sincerity outweighs form. Rumi makes it unmistakably clear. A prayer that comes from a burning heart, even in broken words, reaches further than one recited perfectly but felt emptily. God doesn't grade your grammar. He reads your chest. Second, spiritual arrogance is one of the most dangerous things a person can carry. Rumi shows us that even Moses, a prophet, can fall into it. Knowledge without humility becomes a weapon. It pushes people away from God instead of drawing them closer. Third, and this one cuts deep, Rumi suggests that love, at its highest, eventually moves beyond all forms. The shepherd's journey doesn't end with permission to pray his way. It ends with silence, with a love so total that words dissolve. Rumi points to a place where the lover and the beloved meet without language, without ritual, without any mediator. And maybe that's the real parable here. Not just about prayer, about everything. About how we judge others, about how we confuse the container with what's inside it, about how the ones who look foolish on the outside might be the ones most on fire within. Rumi doesn't ask us to abandon form. He asks us to never abandon the heart behind it. Rumi opens the Masnavi, his monumental spiritual epic, not with a lesson, not with a greeting. He opens it with a cry, the cry of a reed flute, and that choice is everything. He tells of a reed, torn from the reed bed, cut from the place it once belonged, hollowed out, holes carved into its body. And now, when breath passes through it, it doesn't speak, it wails. It sings a song so full of ache that anyone who hears it feels something stir inside them, something old, something they can't quite name. Rumi argues that this reed is us, every single one of us. He's saying you were once connected to something vast, something whole. Call it God, call it the source, call it whatever sits right in your chest. But at some point, you were separated, cut away, placed into this world of form and flesh and forgetting. And ever since, there's been a longing, a low hum beneath everything you do, beneath the noise, beneath the ambition, beneath the distractions. There's a pull, a homesickness for a place you can't remember, but somehow can't forget either. That's the reed's cry. And Rumi doesn't try to comfort you here. He doesn't say, "Don't worry, it'll pass." He says the opposite. He says, feel it, stay with it. Because that ache, it's not a flaw, it's a signal. It's the truest thing about you. But here's where it gets deeper.
The reed can only make music because it's been hollowed out. Think about that. If the reed were still full, still solid, still whole in the way it once was, no sound, no song, nothing. It's the emptiness that allows the breath to move through it. It's the wounds, the holes carved into its body, that give the music its shape. Rumi is making a fierce point here. He's saying, your emptiness is not your enemy. Your pain is not punishment. The very things that broke you open, those are the things that allow something sacred to pass through you. A person full of themselves, full of ego, full of certainty, full of noise, cannot carry the divine breath. They're too solid, too blocked. But someone who's been broken, someone who's been emptied by grief, by loss, by longing, they become an instrument, and through them, something larger begins to speak. So what does this parable teach? First, separation is real, and it hurts. Rumi doesn't pretend otherwise. He acknowledges the wound before offering any medicine. And that honesty is what makes his words land so hard. You're not broken because you feel incomplete. You feel incomplete because you remember, somewhere deep, what wholeness felt like. Second, longing is not a problem to solve. It's a compass. Rumi treats yearning as sacred. Most people spend their lives trying to silence that inner ache. They fill it with work, with relationships, with noise. But Rumi warns, don't numb it, follow it. That longing is pointing you back toward the source. Third, emptiness is the prerequisite for grace. You don't receive by being full. You receive by being open, hollow, available. The reed didn't choose to be cut, but once it was, it became capable of music no solid thing could ever produce. And fourth, suffering, when understood rightly, transforms. It doesn't just sit inside you and rot. It becomes song, it becomes art, it becomes wisdom, but only if you stop resisting it, only if you let the breath move through. Rumi begins his entire life's work with this parable, not as decoration, as a doorway. He's saying, before we go any further, understand this. You are the reed, and the ache you carry, it's not the problem, it's the beginning of the music. Rumi compares the human being to a guest house. That's it. That's the whole setup. You, your body, your mind, your entire inner life are not the owner. You're the innkeeper. And every morning, something new walks through the door. Joy shows up, welcome, that's easy. But then comes sorrow, frustration, shame, a dark thought you didn't invite, a wave of anger that seems to come from nowhere. Rumi says, welcome them too, all of them. He doesn't say tolerate them, he doesn't say endure them. He says, welcome them. Treat each guest honorably, because each one, he argues, has been sent as a guide. Now, sit with that for a moment, because most of us do the exact opposite. When pain arrives, we slam the door. When sadness knocks, we pretend we're not home. We medicate, we distract, we scroll, we numb. Anything to avoid sitting with what's uncomfortable. Rumi sees this as a mistake, not a moral failing, a misunderstanding. He argues that every emotion, even the ones that feel destructive, carries something essential, a message, a clearing, a preparation for something new. He writes, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. That line hits different when you're actually in the middle of loss, when life has stripped you bare. Rumi doesn't offer comfort in the cheap sense. He offers perspective.
He says, maybe the emptiness isn't punishment. Maybe it's making room. And here's what makes this parable so sharp. Rumi isn't talking about positive thinking. He's not saying, look on the bright side. He's saying something far more radical. Stop categorizing your inner experiences as good or bad. Stop fighting half of what you feel. The guest house doesn't get to choose its guests, and neither do you.
But you choose how you receive them. That's the shift. That's what Rumi points to. Not control, but hospitality. A posture of openness toward your own inner life. Even the ugly parts. Especially the ugly parts. He warns, quietly but firmly, that resistance is what creates real suffering, not the emotion itself. Sadness doesn't destroy you. Fighting sadness does. Anger doesn't break you. Suppressing anger, pretending it isn't there, pushing it into some dark corner, that's what festers. That's what turns a passing visitor into a permanent resident. So what do we actually learn from this? The first lesson, your emotions are not your enemies. Rumi treats every feeling as a visitor with purpose. Not permanent, not random, purposeful. When you stop resisting them, they pass through. When you fight them, they stay. The second lesson, emptiness is not always loss. Sometimes it's preparation. Rumi suggests that the most painful experiences are often clearing the way for something you couldn't have received otherwise. The house had to be emptied first. You just couldn't see why yet. The third lesson, you are not your emotions. You are the guest house, the space in which they arrive and leave. Rumi draws a quiet but powerful line between who you are and what you feel. And that distinction, that's where real freedom lives. Not in controlling what comes, but in knowing you are larger than any single guest. The fourth lesson, welcome is a practice, not a feeling. You won't always want to open the door. Rumi knows that. But he argues that the act of welcoming, even reluctantly, even through gritted teeth, changes your entire relationship with suffering. This isn't a poem about being happy. It's a poem about being whole. Rumi argues that you cannot be fully alive while rejecting half of your experience. The guest house must remain open. Every door, every window, every room. That's the price of being human, and Rumi would say it's worth paying. One morning, a man rushes into the court of King Solomon, his face drained of color, his hands trembling. He's barely able to speak. He tells Solomon that he just saw the angel of death, and the angel looked at him, stared at him, with a gaze so fierce, so intense, it could only mean one thing: his time had come. So the man begs. He pleads with Solomon to save him. "Command the wind," he says. "Send me far from here. Send me to India. Let me outrun what's coming." And Solomon, in his mercy, grants the request. The wind lifts the man and carries him across mountains, across seas, all the way to India. Gone, safe, or so he believes. But then Solomon turns to the angel of death, and he asks calmly, "Why did you look at that man with such fury? You terrified him." And here's where the parable cracks open. The angel of death replies, "That was not fury. That was surprise. I looked at him with astonishment, because God had commanded me to take his soul today, in India. And yet there he was, standing in your court, thousands of miles away. I wondered, how will this man possibly reach India in time?" The man ran from death, and the very act of running, that desperate, frantic flight, is exactly what delivered him to it. He didn't escape his fate. He fulfilled it with his own two hands, with his own fear.
Rumi tells this story not to make you feel helpless. He tells it to make you see something most people spend their entire lives ignoring. He argues that fear is not a shield, it is a current, and it pulls you, not away from what you dread, but directly toward it. The man was not a victim of cruelty, he was a victim of his own panic. His flight was the trap, his escape was the cage. And Rumi doesn't stop there, he pushes deeper. He points out that we spend so much of our lives running from loss, running from pain, running from the things we cannot control. We rearrange our entire existence to avoid discomfort. We move cities, we change names, we build walls, and we call it wisdom. We call it self-preservation. But Rumi calls it blindness, because the thing you're running from, it's not behind you, it's ahead of you, and every step you take in fear is a step closer to it. So, what does this parable actually teach? First, you cannot outrun what is written for you. Rumi makes this plain. Destiny is not a place you stumble into, it is a thread woven into the very fabric of your being. You can resist it, you can deny it, but you cannot undo it. The man fled to India, and India was exactly where he was meant to die. Second, fear distorts your vision. The angel of death was not angry, he was surprised. But the man's terror twisted what he saw. He saw hostility where there was none. He read threat into a gaze that held only wonder, and that misreading cost him everything. Rumi warns that when you look at the world through fear, you will always see enemies, even where none exist.
Third, surrender is not weakness. This is perhaps the hardest lesson Rumi offers. He suggests that the bravest thing a human being can do is stop running, to stand still, to face what comes,
Not with resignation, but with trust. Trust that what reaches you was always meant to reach you, and what misses you was never yours to begin with. The man wanted to live, and that wanting, that desperate, clinging, fearful wanting, became the very road to his end. Rumi's message is quiet, but it cuts deep. Stop running, start seeing. There's a man living in Baghdad, poor, struggling, barely surviving. And one night, he has a dream. A voice tells him, "Your treasure is in Cairo. Go to Cairo and you will find it." So he goes. He sells what little he has, travels across deserts, through exhaustion, through hunger, through doubt. He finally arrives in Cairo, broken, penniless, desperate. And there's no treasure waiting for him. He ends up on the streets. He's robbed, beaten, and thrown before a police captain. When the captain asks why he came all this way to Cairo, the man tells him the truth. "I had a dream. A voice told me my treasure was here." The captain laughs, hard. He says, "You fool, I've had the same kind of dream. A voice told me there's a treasure buried under a house in Baghdad." Then he describes the house, every detail. The courtyard, the old tree in the yard. It's the man's own house. The man returns to Baghdad, digs beneath his own floor. And there it is, the treasure. Rumi tells the story in the Masmudi, and it lands like a blow to the chest, because he's not just telling a tale about some man in Baghdad. He's talking about us, every single one of us. Rumi argues that human beings spend their lives searching outward for meaning, for God, for peace, for fulfillment, when the very thing they're chasing has always been buried inside them, right there, under their own feet, but they can't see it, not yet. And here's what makes this parable cut deeper than it first appears. The man had to go to Cairo. That's the part people miss. The journey wasn't a mistake. It wasn't wasted time.
He couldn't have found the treasure at home without leaving first. He needed the failure. He needed the humiliation. He needed to hear a stranger describe his own house back to him before he could recognize what he already had. Rumi points out something brutal here. Self-knowledge doesn't come easy. It doesn't come cheap. You don't just sit in your room and suddenly discover what's buried beneath you. You have to lose yourself first. You have to wander. You have to be laughed at. You have to be stripped bare. The search is the preparation. So what does this parable teach? The treasure is already yours. Rumi insists, again and again across the Masnavi, that what you're looking for is not somewhere else, not in another city, not in another person, not in another life. It's here. It's been here. But proximity breeds blindness. We overlook what is closest to us precisely because it is so close. The journey outward is necessary. This is the paradox Rumi holds up. You can't skip the search. You can't shortcut your way to self-awareness. The wandering, the confusion, the suffering, it's not punishment, it's preparation. You had to leave home to understand what home means. Suffering strips away distraction. The man didn't find the treasure when he was comfortable. He found it after he was robbed, after he was humiliated, after everything was taken from him. Rumi suggests that hardship has a purpose. It cracks open the shell of ego so something deeper can finally emerge. Listen, but don't stop at the surface. The man heard a voice in his dream. He followed it, but he took it literally. Rumi warns that divine guidance often speaks in metaphor. The real message wasn't go to Cairo. The real message was wake up, pay attention. The answer is closer than you think. This parable is not comfortable. It doesn't offer a quick fix. Rumi never does. He holds up a mirror and asks, how far are you willing to travel before you realize you've been standing on top of what you need all along? And maybe that's the deepest lesson here. The treasure was never hidden from the man. The man was hidden from himself. A man walks up to the door of someone he loves. He knocks. A voice from inside asks, "Who's there?" And the man answers, proudly, simply, "It is I." The door doesn't open. He knocks again. Same question, same answer, same silence. The door stays shut. No explanation, no argument, just rejection. And the man leaves, devastated, confused. He doesn't understand what went wrong. He gave his name, he showed up, he declared himself. What more could the beloved want? So he wanders, for months, maybe years. Rumi doesn't rush this part, and that matters, because what happens next isn't quick. The man goes through fire, solitude, grief. He sits with the weight of that closed door, and something inside him starts to crack. Not break, crack. The way light gets into places that were sealed too tight. And then he returns. He knocks again. The same voice asks, "Who's there?" But this time, the man answers differently. He says, "It is you." And the door opens. That's the whole parable. Simple on the surface. But Rumi buries something enormous inside it. See, Rumi isn't telling a love story, not in the way we usually think of love stories. He's making an argument about the self, about what the I really costs us. He's saying, the ego is the door that fits door, yours. When the man says, "It is I," he's carrying separation with him. He's standing outside, announcing his own existence as something apart. Something distinct. And Rumi argues that this is the very thing that keeps us locked out, not just from God,
not just from love, but from truth itself. The insistence on I creates a wall, a second presence in a space meant for one. But when the man returns and says, "It is you," he's not performing humility. He's not playing a trick to get the door open. He's been transformed. The wandering did something to him.
The pain did something. He no longer experiences himself as separate. He has dissolved. And Rumi suggests that only in that dissolution does real union become possible. This is fana, the Sufi concept of annihilation of the self. And Rumi doesn't present it as philosophy. He presents it as a lived experience. A man, a door, a question asked twice.
Two different answers, two completely different outcomes.
And here's what makes this parable hit so hard. It's not about becoming nothing. Rumi isn't saying erase yourself. He's saying stop standing in your own way. The ego doesn't protect you. It isolates you. It makes you knock on doors that would have opened if you hadn't shown up so full of yourself.
So what does this parable actually teach? First, the ego is the barrier, not the world, not other people, not circumstances. Rumi points directly at the I and says, that's your problem. That sense of separateness you carry everywhere, it's the locked door.
Second, transformation requires suffering. The man didn't just decide to change his answer. He wandered, he burned. He sat in the discomfort of rejection long enough for it to reshape him. Rumi makes it clear, there are no shortcuts to this kind of growth. Third, love demands dissolution, not declaration. The man declared himself the first time, and it wasn't enough, because real love, real connection, isn't about announcing who you are. It's about forgetting who you are, merging, disappearing into something larger. And finally, the door was never locked from the outside. Rumi suggests quietly but unmistakably that the beloved was always willing. The obstacle was never out there. It was in here, in the man's own sense of self. The door opens when you stop being the one knocking. There's a story Rumi tells in the Masnavi about two groups of painters, one Chinese, one Greek, and both are given a challenge. A king wants to see who the greater artists are, so he assigns them each a wall, facing one another, inside the same room. A curtain hangs between them. Neither group can see what the other is doing. The Chinese painters get to work immediately. They request every pigment, every rare color they can find. They paint with precision, layer after layer, detail after detail. They pour everything they have onto that wall. Skill, technique, mastery, the full arsenal of their craft. The Greek painters, they ask for nothing. No colors, no pigments, no brushes, nothing. Instead, they polish. They spend the entire time cleaning and polishing their wall, stripping it bare, removing every scratch, every blemish, every imperfection, until it becomes like a mirror. And when the curtain is finally lifted, something breathtaking happens. The Chinese wall is magnificent, a masterpiece of color and form. But the Greek wall, it reflects the Chinese painting and somehow makes it even more luminous, more alive. Because the light hits that polished surface and bounces back with a clarity the original doesn't have on its own. The king is stunned. Rumi doesn't tell this story to entertain. He tells it to dismantle something we carry deep inside us, the belief that accumulation is the path to greatness. He argues that the Greek painters represent the Sufis, the mystics, those who understand that the real work isn't about adding more,
It's about removing what's in the way.
Polishing the heart until it becomes so clear, so empty, that it reflects divine light without distortion. And the Chinese painters? They're not failures. Rumi doesn't dismiss them. Their art is real. Their skill is genuine. But he makes a sharp distinction. There's a difference between creating beauty and becoming a vessel for it. One is effort. The other is surrender. He's pointing at something most people spend their whole lives missing. We think transformation means acquiring more knowledge, more skills, more credentials, more experiences. We keep layering things on top of ourselves, like paint on a wall. And some of it is beautiful, sure. But underneath all of it, the surface is still rough, still scratched, still clouded. Rumi suggests the deeper path is subtraction, not addition. Polish the mirror, remove the rust. Let go of the ego, the noise, the pretense. And what's left isn't emptiness, it's everything. Because a clean mirror doesn't generate its own image. It receives, it reflects. It shows truth as it is. And here's what makes this parable cut so deep. Rumi isn't just talking about spiritual practice. He's talking about how we live, how we love, how we listen. A heart full of its own agenda can't reflect another person's pain. A mind cluttered with opinions can't receive wisdom. A soul layered with fear and performance can't let light pass through. So what does this parable teach? First, that purity is more powerful than decoration. The most profound transformation doesn't come from what you add to yourself. It comes from what you're willing to strip away. Second, that receptivity is a form of mastery. The Greek painters weren't lazy. Polishing takes discipline. Stillness takes strength. Surrender isn't passive. It's the hardest work there is. And third, Rumi reminds us that the purpose of the heart is not to produce light, it's to reflect it. The moment you stop trying to be the source, you become the clearest mirror in the room. That's the difference Rumi draws between knowledge and wisdom, between effort and grace, between the one who paints and the one who becomes the painting, not by doing more, by becoming less.
There's a story Rumi tells right at the beginning of the Masnavi, Book 1, almost like he's saying, if you don't understand this, you won't understand anything that follows. A king falls in love with a handmaiden. He buys her, brings her into his palace, and then she falls gravely ill, desperately ill, the kind of illness that drains the light out of a person. The king panics. He summons every physician in the land, the best doctors, the most celebrated healers. One after another, they examine her. They prescribe remedies, potions, treatments. Nothing works. She only gets worse. And here's where Rumi makes his first strike. He points out that these physicians failed not because they lacked knowledge, but because they were arrogant. They trusted their own skills so completely that they forgot to ask for guidance from something higher. They didn't pause, didn't surrender. They walked in full of themselves, and they walked out empty-handed. So the king, broken and humbled, does what he should have done from the start. He turns to God. He prays, not a casual prayer, a desperate one. The kind you only make when everything you've tried has crumbled. And God answers. In a dream, the king is told, a physician will come to you, a real one. Trust him. The next day, a wise man appears, a divine physician. Not divine because of degrees or reputation, but because he sees with a different eye. He examines the handmaiden, checks her pulse, asks her questions. And what does he find? Her illness isn't physical. It never was. She's lovesick.
She's in love with a goldsmith from the city of Samarkand. Her body wasn't breaking down from disease, it was breaking down from longing, from separation, from a wound no medicine could reach. Rumi argues that this is the condition of most human beings. We carry sicknesses that aren't really sicknesses. We suffer from things we can't name. And we keep going to the wrong doctors, looking for external fixes to internal fractures. Now the divine physician tells the king to bring the goldsmith to the palace. The king does. The handmaiden begins to recover. She glows again. She lives again. But then something unsettling happens. The physician slowly poisons the goldsmith. Not out of cruelty, but with purpose. As the goldsmith weakens, as his beauty fades, as the object of her obsession becomes less and less desirable, the handmaiden's attachment dissolves. She lets go, not because someone forced her to, but because the thing she clung to revealed itself for what it really was: temporary, fading, mortal. And that's the deeper surgery Rumi is performing here. He warns that the attachments we build to worldly things, to people, to beauty, to desire, are often the very chains keeping us sick, not because those things are evil, but because we mistake them for ultimate sources of fulfillment. We pour the infinite weight of our longing onto finite things, and they buckle every time. The handmaiden's real cure wasn't getting what she wanted. It was being freed from wanting it so desperately. So, what does Rumi want us to carry from this? A few things. Heavy things.
First, not every suffering has an obvious cause. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't show up on the surface, and the people who heal them aren't always the ones with credentials. They're the ones with sight.
Second, ego blocks healing. The physicians who failed weren't stupid. They were proud, and pride made them blind. Rumi suggests that real wisdom begins where self-certainty ends. Third, and this is the sharpest lesson, our attachments are not our answers. The things we crave, the people we cling to, the desires we build our whole lives around, they can become the very illness we're trying to cure. Liberation, Rumi tells us, doesn't come from getting what you love. It comes from no longer being enslaved by it.
There's a story Rumi tells that cuts straight to the bone of how we see and how we fail to see. A caliph hears about Layla, the famous Layla, the woman Majnun has lost his entire mind over. Majnun, the one they call the madman, wanders the desert, weeping, reciting poetry, refusing food, refusing shelter, all for her, all for Layla. His love has become legend. People speak of it in courts and alleyways alike, so the caliph grows curious. What kind of woman could do this to a man? What face could hold that much power? He has to see for himself, and he does. Layla is brought before him. He looks at her, studies her, and nothing. She's ordinary, average even. No blinding beauty, no otherworldly presence, just a woman. So the caliph says it plainly. This is her? This is the one Majnun lost himself over? You're no more beautiful than any other woman. And Layla responds with one line that Rumi drives like a nail into the reader's chest. She says, "Be silent. You are not Majnun. To see my beauty, you need the eyes of Majnun." That's it. That's the whole teaching. And it's devastating. Rumi argues here that the problem was never Layla. The problem was the caliph's eyes. He looked at her with the eyes of a ruler, eyes trained to measure, evaluate, compare, eyes that see surfaces. But Majnun didn't see with those eyes. He saw with the eyes of love. And love doesn't measure. Love reveals. This is not a parable about romantic obsession.
Rumi is using Majnun and Layla as a metaphor for something far larger. He's pointing at the way most people engage with truth, with beauty, with the sacred. They look, but they cannot see. They stand in front of something extraordinary and shrug, not because the thing lacks depth, but because they lack the capacity to perceive it.
The Caliph had power, wealth, authority, but he didn't have the one thing that mattered in that moment, the inner state required to recognize what was in front of him, and no throne in the world can give you that. Rumi makes this point again and again throughout the Masnavi. Perception is not passive, it's not neutral. What you see depends entirely on what you bring to the seeing. Two people can stand before the same sunset, the same scripture, the same human being, and one is shattered open by it, and the other walks away unmoved. The difference isn't in the thing, it's in the witness. So what does this parable teach? First, beauty is not in the object. It's in the relationship between the seer and the seen. Rumi insists that without the right inner state, even the most sacred thing will look ordinary. You won't see it.
You can't, not because it's hidden, but because your eyes aren't ready. Second, love is a way of seeing, not just an emotion, not just a feeling. Rumi treats love as a perceptual shift. When Majnun looks at Layla, he's not exaggerating. He's seeing something real, something the Caliph's transactional mind simply cannot access. Third, power and status don't guarantee understanding.
The Caliph sits on a throne, Majnun sits in the dirt, and yet Majnun sees more. Rumi warns, don't confuse worldly rank with spiritual clarity. They are not the same thing. They rarely even overlap. And fourth, if something sacred appears dull to you, the question to ask isn't, what's wrong with it? The question is, what's missing in me?
That reversal is what makes Rumi so uncomfortable and so honest. He doesn't let you stand outside the parable and judge. He pulls you in and makes you the Caliph. And then he asks, whose eyes are you seeing with? A mouse grabs hold of a camel's lead rope, starts walking. The camel follows, and for a while, the mouse believes it's in charge. That's the setup. Simple, almost funny. But Rumi isn't telling a joke. He's exposing something we all do, and most of us never catch ourselves doing it. The mouse struts forward, full of confidence. It tugs the rope, the camel moves. So naturally, the mouse assumes it's the one with power. It feels big, important, in control. And why wouldn't it? The evidence seems to confirm the story. The camel is following. The rope is in its hands. Everything checks out. Until they reach the river. The mouse freezes. The water stretches out wide and deep. And suddenly, all that confidence, gone. The mouse can't cross. It can't move. It turns to the camel, helpless. And the camel speaks. Calmly, without mockery, he says, "The water is only knee-deep for me. Step in and see where it reaches on you." Rumi uses this moment to land the real blow. The mouse was never leading the camel. The camel was allowing itself to be led. There is a difference, and it's enormous.
The mouse mistook the camel's patience for its own power. It confused permission with dominance. And Rumi argues this is exactly what the ego does. It grabs the rope of something far greater than itself. Life, fate, God, the forces that actually move things, and walks around convinced it's running the show. Things go well for a while, and the ego takes credit. I did this, I made this happen, I'm in control.
But then the river comes, the crisis, the loss, the thing too big to handle. and the ego has nothing. No tools, no depth, no capacity. It just stands at the edge, paralyzed. Rumi doesn't mock the mouse.
That's important. He doesn't shame it, he reveals it. He holds up a mirror and says, "Look, this is what self-deception looks like from the outside. It looks absurd, but from the inside, it feels completely real. And that's what makes it so dangerous. The ego doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, 'I'm distorting your perception now.' It just narrates, quietly, constantly, telling you that you're bigger than you are, that you're the one pulling the rope, that the camel moves because of you." Rumi warns, the longer you believe that story, the harder the river hits. So, what does this parable actually teach? The first lesson, the ego inflates, always. Rumi argues that the ego's primary function is to make you feel larger, more capable, more central than you actually are. Not because it's evil, but because it's blind. It cannot see the camel. It can only see the rope in its own hand. The second lesson, patience is not weakness. The camel follows the mouse, not out of submission, but out of grace. Rumi suggests that the forces larger than us often allow us our illusions, for a time, but that tolerance has a limit, and the river is where it ends. The third lesson, you don't know your true size until you're tested. The mouse never questioned its strength because it was never challenged. Rumi points out that ease is not proof of mastery. Smooth roads don't reveal the truth about who's walking them. Only the river does. The fourth lesson, self-awareness is the antidote. Rumi isn't saying you should shrink yourself or live in doubt. He's saying, know what you are. Know your depth. Don't confuse borrowed power with your own. The mouse's tragedy isn't that it's small, it's that it forgot it was small. The rope was never the point. The river was always coming. And Rumi says, better to know your true size before you reach the water's edge.